I was there the day the Golden Guards disappeared. For 10,000 years, the Custodes protected the Emperor on his throne. They never left. They never failed. But that morning, the great gates stood open, and no one was there. Their armor was gone. Their posts were empty. When the Emperor's own protectors walked away, everyone on Terra knew the truth we were too afraid to say out loud, if even they left him behind. Maybe the Emperor didn't need us anymore. I remember the morning the Eternity Gate stood open, not because of any alarm or klaxon, or the thunder of boots on marble. There was no sound at all. That was the first wrong thing. In the palace, there is always sound. The hum of ancient machinery, the chant of servitors, the distant echo of prayers rising from the pilgrim halls below. But that morning, the silence pressed against my ears like water, thick and suffocating. I was a junior scribe in the Administratum's palace registry, assigned to log the daily movements of personnel within the inner sanctum. My task was simple, tedious, wholly to record the names, ranks, and purposes of every soul who passed through the sacred precincts. I had done it for 6 years without incident. My life was numbers and ink, parchment and ritual. I did not expect to witness history. I did not expect to see the end of something eternal. The Eternity Gate is not like other gates. It does not open. It does not close. It simply is, a monument to the Emperor's will, sealed by wards older than the Imperium itself. The Custodes stood before it, golden and immovable, their guardian spears crossed in eternal vigil. I had seen them every day of my service. I had never spoken to one. No one did. They were not men. They were statues given breath, oaths given form. But that morning they were gone. I stood at my station in the East Loggia, stylus in hand, my breath fogging in the cold, recycled air. My console flickered with the day's assignments, standard traffic, minor inspections, nothing unusual. Then I heard it. Or rather, I heard the absence of it. The low, resonant hum that always emanated from the gate, the sound of wards and blessings woven into reality itself, had stopped. I looked up. The gate stood open, not thrown wide, not blasted apart, just open, as if it had always been that way. The golden warriors who had guarded it were gone. Their posts were empty. Their banners hung limp in the windless air, untouched, undisturbed. The spears that had never wavered for 10,000 years lay crossed on the ground, still gleaming, still perfect. But no one held them. I felt my stylus slip from my fingers. It clattered to the floor, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. I did not bend to pick it up. I could not move. My eyes were fixed on the open gate, on the darkness beyond it, on the space where the Custodes should have been. Someone behind me whispered a prayer. Another made the sign of the Aquila. I did neither. I simply stared, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing, because what I was seeing was impossible. The Custodes do not leave their posts. They do not abandon their duty. They are the Emperor's will made manifest, the last and greatest of his servants. They do not simply disappear, but they had. I do not know how long I stood there. Time felt wrong, stretched thin like old fabric. Eventually a voice broke the silence, a senior prefect, his tone shrill with panic. Where are they? Where are the guard? No one answered him. What could we say? We were scribes and clerks, functionaries and paper pushers. We recorded history. We did not make it. We did not understand it. The prefect ran toward the gate, his robes flapping, his augmetic leg whirring with each step. He stopped just short of the threshold, as if some invisible barrier still held. He turned back to us, his face pale, his eyes wide. Get the Praetorians, he said. Get the High Lords, get someone. Now we scattered. I do not remember who I spoke to first, or what I said. The hours that followed were a blur of vox calls and frantic reports, of officials arriving in clusters, of priests murmuring blessings that sounded more like curses. The palace, vast and ancient and normally unshakable, rippled with confusion. Servitors continued their tasks oblivious. Machines hummed their eternal hymns. But the people, the human souls who lived and worked in the Emperor's shadow, moved like ghosts, whispering, trembling, afraid to speak the truth aloud. The Custodes were gone. By midday, the Ministorum had arrived in force. Priests in crimson and gold swept through the loggia, censers swinging, voices raised in hymns of protection. They formed a ring around the gate, as if their presence could replace what had been lost. It was theater. We all knew it. The gate did not care about their prayers. It remained open, silent, indifferent. A bishop old, scarred, his face a map of burns and penance, approached the threshold. He held a relic in his trembling hands, some fragment of bone encased in gold and glass. He stepped forward, lips moving in silent prayer, and reached out toward the darkness beyond the gate. Nothing happened. No light, no wrath, no divine intervention. The relic did not glow. The bishop did not fall. He simply stood there, his hand outstretched, his faith laid bare and unanswered. He withdrew. His face was ashen. He said nothing as he turned and walked away, but I saw the look in his eyes. It was the look of a man who had prayed for a miracle and received only silence. By evening, the High Lords had convened an emergency session. I was not present. Of course, such councils were far beyond my rank, but the rumors spread quickly. Some claimed the custodes had been recalled by the Emperor himself, summoned to some higher purpose. Others whispered of betrayal, of some failure or sin that had severed their bond. A few, the brave or the foolish, suggested the unthinkable, that the custodes had chosen to leave. I did not know what to believe. I only knew what I had seen. The golden warriors were gone, and the gate stood open, and the palace, the heart of the Imperium, the throne of mankind, felt suddenly, terribly fragile. I returned to my station that night, though no one had ordered me to. The loggia was empty now. The priests and officials dispersed to wherever powerful men go to hide their fear. I stood before the open gate alone, and stared into the darkness beyond. I do not know what I expected to see. A sign, perhaps a message. Some proof that the Emperor still watched, still cared. But there was nothing, just darkness and silence and the cold weight of absence. I thought of the custodes then. Those golden giants who had stood here longer than I had been alive, longer than anyone had been alive. I thought of their vigilance, their perfection, their unbreakable oath, and I thought of the fact that they had walked away from it. What could make a custodian abandon his post? What could make the Emperor's chosen turn their backs on Terra? I do not know. I do not think I want to know. But as I stood there in the silence, staring at the empty gate, I felt something I had never felt before in the palace. Not awe, not reverence, not even fear. I felt doubt, and once doubt enters your heart, it never leaves. I left the loggia as the night shift servitors began their rounds, their blank faces reflecting nothing, their movements mechanical and meaningless. The palace continued. The Imperium continued, but something had changed. Something fundamental, something eternal. The golden gates of eternity stood open, and no one stood watch. I returned to my quarters, a narrow cell in the scribe blocks, 10 floors below the sanctum, and lay in my cot, staring at the ceiling. Sleep did not come. My mind replayed the day over and over, the silence, the open gate, the empty posts, the bishop's trembling hand. What happens when the guardians leave? What happens when the light goes out? I did not sleep that night. I have not truly slept since. Because I know now what I did not know then. The custodes did not leave because they failed. They left because we did. And when the Emperor's own angels abandon you, there is no prayer left to say. There is only the dark, and the waiting, and the knowledge that whatever comes next, we deserve it. The palace became a hollow place. It is difficult to explain how a structure so vast, so full of life and machinery and prayer, could feel empty, but it did. In the days following the departure of the custodes, the sanctum became a place of echoes and shadows. The halls that once rang with the measured tread of golden boots now carried only the shuffle of scribes and the hum of forgotten servitors. The air itself felt thinner, colder, as if the warmth of the Emperor's gaze had dimmed. I continued my duties. What else could I do? The administratum does not stop for miracles or disasters. Forms must be filed. Reports must be logged. The great machine of bureaucracy grinds on, indifferent to the crises of faith that plague lesser souls. But even the most loyal functionary cannot ignore the truth forever. Something was wrong. It started with the bells. Every hour, on the hour, the great bells of the sanctum tolled, a reminder to all who dwelt within the palace that the Emperor endured, that his will remained. But 3 days after the gate stood open, the bells stopped ringing at midday. Just stopped. No explanation, no announcement. The silence stretched for 5 minutes, 10, 20. When they finally tolled again, the sound was off. Too low, too slow, as if the mechanisms themselves had grown wary. No one mentioned it. Not officially, but in the mess halls and dormitories, in the whispered conversations between shifts, we all spoke of it. The palace was failing, not in any way the High Lords could measure or the Mechanicus could repair, but in a way far more fundamental. The faith that held it together, the invisible architecture of belief and devotion, was cracking. I saw it in the faces of the priests. The ministorum had flooded the sanctum with confessors and preachers, their voices hoarse from endless sermons, their eyes red from sleepless vigils. They blessed every doorway, every corridor, every threshold, as if their prayers could fill the void left by the custodes. But their words rang hollow. I listened to them sometimes, standing at the edge of their congregations, and I heard the fear beneath the faith. They did not believe their own sermons anymore. How could they? The custodes were the proof of the Emperor's divinity, the living embodiment of his power. To see them leave, to see them choose to leave, was to see the foundation of the Imperium crack. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. The throne itself seemed to feel the absence. I had never been to the throne room. My rank did not permit it, and my soul did not dare it. But I heard the reports. The tech priests who maintained the Golden Throne spoke in hushed tones of irregularities, of fluctuations in the sacred machinery. The hum of the throne, a sound so constant, so pervasive, that most could not hear it anymore, had changed. It was higher now, strained like a machine pushed beyond its limits. Some claimed the Emperor was mourning. Others whispered that he was angry, that he had dismissed his own guardians for some failure we could not comprehend. A few, brave or foolish, suggested that the Emperor had nothing to do with it, that the custodes had left of their own will, and the throne simply continued its eternal vigil, indifferent to the absence of its watchers. I did not know which possibility terrified me more. My work took me deeper into the sanctum in those days. The administratum, in its infinite wisdom, had decided to conduct a full audit of the palace's security protocols. It was a bureaucratic reflex, a way to pretend that order still existed. I was assigned to document the guard posts, the patrol routes, the contingency plans. It was absurd. The custodes had no patrol routes. They did not need them. They simply were omnipresent and eternal. Trying to replace them with mortal guards was like trying to replace the sun with candles. But I did my work. I walked the corridors with my data slate, noting positions and recording observations. And with each step, I felt the weight of the palace pressing down on me. The sanctum had always been oppressive, its grandeur designed to humble, its architecture a monument to humanity's insignificance. But now it felt actively hostile, as if the walls themselves resented our presence. I passed through the gallery of saints, where statues of martyrs and heroes lined the walls, their stone faces frozen in expressions of piety and suffering. One of the statues, a saint whose name I did not know, had begun to weep. Not oil, as the faithful hoped, but rust. The red-brown stain ran down its marble cheeks like blood, pooling on the floor below. A priest knelt before it, murmuring prayers, but his voice was lifeless, mechanical. He did not believe the statue wept for the Emperor's glory. He knew, as I did, that it wept because the palace was dying. The gallery led to the Hall of Vigil, a vast chamber where the custodes had once assembled for their silent councils. The hall was empty now, its benches unused, its vaulted ceiling echoing with the sound of my footsteps. At the far end stood a golden throne, not the golden throne, but a smaller replica, a symbol of the Emperor's authority. It gleamed in the dim light, untouched by time or decay. I approached it slowly, my data slate forgotten. I had seen this throne 100 times, passed it without thought, but now I could not look away. It was beautiful, perfect, and utterly meaningless. Because the Emperor was not here, he had never been here. This was just a statue, just a symbol, just another piece of theater in the endless performance of faith. And the custodes, who had stood in this hall for 10,000 years, had finally seen through it. They had left because they knew the truth. We were alone. I turned away, my hands trembling. I wanted to run, to flee the sanctum and never return. But where would I go? The palace was all I knew. The Imperium was all I knew. There was no escape, no sanctuary beyond the Emperor's reach. So I continued. I filed my reports. I logged my observations. I pretended, as we all did, that nothing had changed. But the air smelled like burnt incense and endings. The administratum clerks worked in silence, their faces blank, their movements automatic. The arbits patrolled the corridors, their armor clanking, their expressions hard. The servitors continued their routines, oblivious to the crisis unfolding around them. And the priests prayed, their voices rising and falling in desperate harmony, trying to drown out the silence where the custodes had once stood. It did not work. The silence was louder than any prayer. I began to notice other changes, small things at first. A statue with a cracked base, a banner torn at the edge, a vox speaker crackling with static. But the small things accumulated like water eroding stone, until the palace itself seemed to sag under their weight. The tech priests tried to repair the damage, but their efforts only highlighted the problem. The palace was not built by human hands alone. It was sustained by faith, by the belief that the Emperor endured and his will remained. Without the custodes, without the living proof of his divinity, that faith was failing. And when faith fails, reality follows. I saw my first ghost on the 7th day. It was late, long past the end of my shift, but I could not sleep. I wandered the lower corridors, my footsteps echoing in the darkness, trying to outrun the thoughts that plagued me. I turned a corner and saw a figure standing at the end of the hall, a custodian, tall and golden, his guardian spear gleaming in the dim light. My heart stopped. He was there, solid and real, just as they had always been. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask where he had been, to beg him to return, but the words died in my throat. Because he was not looking at me, he was looking past me, through me, as if I did not exist. And then, as I watched, he faded. Not quickly, not dramatically, just faded, like a dream upon waking, until there was nothing left but the empty corridor and the sound of my own breathing. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space where he had been, trying to convince myself I had imagined it, but I knew the truth. The palace was haunted, not by the dead, but by the absent, by the memory of what had been, and the terror of what would come. I returned to my quarters and did not speak of what I had seen. What would I say? Who would believe me? The administratum did not traffic in ghosts. It dealt in facts, in numbers, in the cold logic of bureaucracy. But facts and logic could not explain the custodes' departure. They could not explain the rust on the statues, or the silence of the bells, or the golden ghost I had seen in the corridor. The palace was failing, the throne was straining, and we, the clerks and priests and scribes who pretended to serve the emperor, were nothing but actors in a play that had long since lost its audience. I thought of the bishop, reaching out toward the open gate, his faith laid bare and unanswered. I thought of the statue weeping rust, and the bells ringing out of tune, and the custodian who faded like smoke. And I understood. The emperor's chosen had not abandoned us. They had simply stopped pretending. In their absence, the power vacuum grew. It is a strange thing to watch the Imperium devour itself. From the outside, nothing seemed to change. The palace stood, the throne endured, the administratum issued its daily decrees, the arbits enforced their laws, and the priests continued their sermons. But beneath the surface, in the shadowed halls where power truly resides, the feeding frenzy had begun. The High Lords of Terra, those 12 souls who claimed dominion over humanity in the Emperor's name, scrambled for control like rats in a sinking ship. Each claimed divine sanction to protect the throne in the custodes' absence. Each issued edicts and counter-edicts, proclamations and denunciations, all stamped with the imperial seal and all contradicting one another. I was assigned to the Registry of Commands, a subsection of the administratum tasked with cataloguing the orders of the High Lords. It was meant to be a simple archival duty, a way to ensure that history remembered who had said what when. But in the days following the departure, it became a battlefield. Every hour brought new commands. The Lord Commander Militant declared martial law across the palace district. The master of the administratum countermanded it, citing ancient precedent. The ecclesiarch demanded that all secular authority yield to the ministorum. The fabricator general invoked the Treaty of Mars, claiming independence from Terra's governance. The inquisitorial representative, a gaunt woman whose name I dared not speak, arrived unannounced and seized 3 data vaults, declaring their contents pertinent to the security of the Imperium. No one stopped her. That was when I knew the old order was dead. The Inquisition does not act without cause, and they do not seize records unless something has already gone terribly wrong. Whatever they found in those vaults, whatever secrets they uncovered, they did not share. They simply left, their black ships rising from the palace spaceport in silence, carrying away pieces of the truth. The Vox networks buzzed with decrees and counter-decrees. I listened to them sometimes, my headset crackling with static, and marveled at the speed of the collapse. It took 10,000 years to build the Imperium, and less than a week for it to begin tearing itself apart. The arbits deployed en masse across the sprawl. Their black armor became a common sight in the sanctum, their presence a reminder that order, or at least the appearance of order, would be maintained. They did not speak to us. They did not need to. Their presence was the message: obey, or be made to obey. I saw my first execution on the 10th day. A junior prelate, no older than 30, had been caught distributing pamphlets in the pilgrim quarters. I do not know what the pamphlets said. I do not think anyone did. But the arbits dragged him into the Plaza of Martyrs, forced him to his knees, and shot him in the back of the head while a crowd of functionaries watched in silence. His crime, they said, was undermining the continuity of imperial governance. I did not ask what that meant. I filed the report, logged the execution, and moved on. What else could I do? The plaza was cleaned within the hour, the blood washed away, the body removed. By evening a new plaque had been installed, declaring the prelate a traitor and a heretic. By the next morning, no one mentioned him at all. He had been erased, written out of history as if he had never existed. That was the power of the administratum. We did not rule through force alone. We ruled through paperwork, through the meticulous editing of reality until the truth became whatever we decided it should be. But the truth had a way of asserting itself. The pilgrim halls beneath the palace, vast chambers where the faithful came to worship and die, became a powder keg. The pilgrims had always been there, a constant presence, their prayers and suffering a background noise to the business of governance. But in the absence of the custodes, they grew restless. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said the emperor had withdrawn his protection from Terra. Others claimed he was dead, that the Golden Throne had failed, and the custodes had fled before the collapse. A few, brave or insane, proclaimed that the emperor had transcended, that he no longer needed the Imperium, and his chosen had gone to serve him in a higher realm. The priests tried to contain the unrest, but their sermons only made it worse. They spoke of trials and tribulations, of tests of faith, of the need for penance and sacrifice. The pilgrims, already half-starved and delirious, took them at their word. They began to flagellate themselves in the streets, their cries echoing through the palace halls. They tore at their flesh with rusted blades, convinced that their pain would summon the custodes back, would prove their worthiness to the emperor. It did not work. The abbots were called in to restore order. I do not know how many died. The reports I received were heavily redacted, entire sections blacked out or replaced with euphemisms, necessary enforcement action, minimal collateral damage, the emperor's will, manifest. I knew what those words meant. I had written them myself, in other reports on other days. They meant the streets ran red and the bodies were burned, and no one would ever speak of it again. I began to hate my work, not openly, not loudly. I still filed my reports, still logged my observations, still played my part in the great machine. But inside, in the quiet spaces where thoughts are born, I felt something crumble. The faith I had once held, fragile and unexamined, but real, was gone. In its place was only exhaustion, and the bitter knowledge that I was complicit in something monstrous. The High Lords continued their power struggle, oblivious or indifferent to the suffering below. They met in closed councils guarded by Lucifer Blacks and Servo Skulls, and emerged with proclamations that only deepened the chaos. The Lord Commander Militant ordered the fortification of the palace, turning it into a fortress within a fortress. The Ecclesiarch declared a month of penance, demanding that every soul on Terra devote themselves to prayer and fasting. The Master of the Administratum issued a decree stating that the continuity of governance supersedes all other concerns. A bureaucratic way of saying that the machine would keep grinding, no matter how many lives it consumed. I was tasked with documenting the continuity of order, a phrase that appeared in every official report, every Vox broadcast, every public announcement. It was a lie, of course. There was no continuity, there was no order. There was only the pretense of both, maintained through force and fear and the relentless machinery of bureaucracy. But I did my work. I always did. The palace became a labyrinth of checkpoints and security zones. Areas that had once been open to all functionaries were now restricted, accessible only with special clearance. I spent hours each day navigating the new regulations, presenting my credentials to board abbots, waiting in lines that stretched for kilometers. The inefficiency was staggering, but no one dared complain. Complaint was sedition. Sedition was death. I saw the first signs of real collapse in the lower hives. The palace sat atop a mountain of infrastructure, power plants, water reclamation facilities, food processing centers, all maintained by an army of menials who worked in darkness and died in obscurity. In the absence of the custodes, that infrastructure began to fail. Not catastrophically, not yet, but the signs were there. Power outages that lasted minutes instead of seconds. Water that tasted of rust and chemicals. Food shipments delayed by logistical complications. The High Lords did not notice, or if they did not care. Their quarters were insulated, their needs attended to by 1,000 unseen hands. They lived in a bubble of privilege and power, blind to the rot spreading beneath them. But I noticed. I walked the lower corridors, my data slate in hand, and I saw the fear in the eyes of the menials. I heard their whispers, their prayers, their desperate questions. Where are the golden ones? Why have they left us? When will they return? I had no answers. I do not think anyone did. The Mechanicus, pragmatic as ever, began reinforcing the throne's mechanisms. Entire legions of tech priests descended into the sanctum, their red robes swirling, their augmetics clicking and whirring. They did not speak to us. They did not acknowledge our presence. They simply worked, their rituals incomprehensible, their purpose opaque. I watched them sometimes from the galleries above and wondered what they knew. The Mechanicus guarded their secrets jealously, but I suspected they understood the truth better than anyone. The Golden Throne was failing. It had been failing for millennia, held together by faith and the Emperor's will. Without the custodes, without the living embodiment of his power, that will was weakening. How long before the throne failed completely? How long before Terra, and the Imperium with it, fell into the dark? I did not know. I do not think anyone did. But as I filed my reports, logged my observations, and played my part in the great lie, I felt the weight of inevitability settle over me. The custodes had seen this coming. They had stood watch for 10,000 years, and then they had looked at what the Imperium had become. The cruelty, the corruption, the endless grinding suffering. And they had walked away. They had left us to our fate. And as I stood in the registry of commands, surrounded by mountains of paperwork, drowning in decrees and counter-decrees, I understood why. We did not deserve them. We did not deserve the Emperor. We did not deserve salvation. All we deserved was this: the slow collapse, the grinding decay, the endless bureaucratic nightmare of an Imperium eating itself alive. Every edict written in gold was countered in blood. The Emperor's palace became less a monument and more a mausoleum of faith. And I, loyal servant, faithful scribe, became the record keeper of our damnation. The Pilgrims came in greater numbers than ever before. They arrived in waves, great tides of humanity spilling from the hive cities and transit stations, their faces gaunt with desperation, their voices hoarse from prayer. They came seeking reassurance that the Emperor's will remained unbroken, that his light still shone from the Golden Throne, that the departure of the custodes meant nothing, or everything, or something they could understand. The priests could not answer their prayers. I watched from the upper galleries as the faithful crowded into the pilgrim halls, their bodies pressed together in a mass of flesh and rags and fervent need. They wept. They sang. They tore at their clothing and beat their chests, crying out for a sign, any sign, that the Emperor still watched over them. No sign came. The Ministorum tried. The ecclesiarchy mobilized every confessor, every preacher, every deacon and acolyte they could muster. They erected stages in the halls and delivered sermons that lasted hours, their voices amplified by ancient vox casters, their words echoing off the vaulted ceilings until the air itself seemed to vibrate with faith. But I heard the strain in their voices. I saw the doubt in their eyes. They spoke of trials and tribulations, of the Emperor's mysterious will, of the need for patience and obedience. They quoted scripture and invoked martyrs, their sermons thick with dogma and empty of conviction. The Pilgrims did not believe them. How could they? The custodes were gone. The golden warriors who had stood as proof of the Emperor's divinity, who had never failed, never faltered, never left their posts in 10,000 years. They had abandoned Terra. And if they, the most faithful, the most devoted, the most perfect of the Emperor's servants, had turned away, what did that say about the rest of us? The Pilgrims began to break, not all at once, not in any organized fashion, but in the quiet hours between sermons, in the dark corners where the priests' voices did not reach. The faithful became the faithless. I saw it in their eyes, the moment when belief shattered, when prayer became accusation, when devotion curdled into rage. The first riot started on the 14th day. I was in the archive of remembrance, cataloging a new shipment of death certificates, when the alarm bells began to ring. Not the great bells of the sanctum. Those had been silent for days now, but the shrill, mechanical klaxons of the arbits. I looked up from my work, my heart pounding, and heard the distant roar of voices. The Pilgrims had turned on the priests. I abandoned my station and ran toward the sound, my curiosity overriding my self-preservation. The corridors were chaos, servitors frozen in confusion, functionaries fleeing, arbit squads rushing past in tight formation. I followed the black armored figures, staying close to the walls, until I reached the Gallery of Saints. The scene was carnage. A mob of pilgrims, hundreds, maybe thousands, had stormed the gallery and torn down the statues. The marble saints lay shattered on the floor, their faces broken, their halos bent. The pilgrims swarmed over the wreckage, screaming prayers and curses in equal measure. Some wept as they smashed the stone, as if each blow broke their own hearts. Others laughed, their voices shrill with hysteria, as if the destruction were a kind of liberation. At the center of the mob stood a preacher, his robes torn, his face bleeding. He was shouting something, his voice barely audible over the din, but I caught fragments of it. False idols abandoned us, he does not hear, never heard. An Arbit's squad reached the gallery moments later. They did not negotiate. They did not give warnings. They simply opened fire. The roar of shotguns drowned out the screams. Bodies fell, torn apart by shells designed to stop charging orcs. The mob recoiled, stumbled, and then surged forward again, driven by something beyond fear or reason. The Arbits fired again, and again, and again. When the smoke cleared, the gallery was silent. The floor was slick with blood. The walls were pocked with craters, and the pilgrims, what was left of them, lay scattered like discarded dolls, their bodies twisted, their faces frozen in expressions of rage and sorrow. I turned away and vomited. I had seen death before. The Imperium is built on death, sustained by it, defined by it. But this was different. These were not soldiers dying in battle, or criminals executed for their crimes. These were believers. They had come to Terra to worship, to give their lives meaning, to touch the hem of the Emperor's glory. And they had been gunned down like animals. I staggered back to the archive, my hands shaking, my mind reeling. I logged the incident in the daily report, minor disturbance in the Gallery of Saints, Arbit's response successful, no further action required, 18 words to describe a massacre. That was my job, that was what I did. I turned atrocity into paperwork, suffering into statistics, horror into bureaucratic prose. I hated myself for it, but I did it anyway. The riot spread. Within days, every pilgrim hall in the palace was in turmoil. The Arbits deployed in force, their black armor omnipresent, their shotguns never silent. The death toll climbed into the thousands, then the tens of thousands. The bodies were burned in the deep furnaces, their ashes scattered into the recycle systems, their names forgotten before their flesh had cooled. The Ministorum tried to regain control. They declared the rioters heretics, enemies of the faith, servants of the ruinous powers. They called for purges and penance, for blood and fire, for the faithful to cleanse themselves of doubt, but their words rang hollow. Everyone, priests and pilgrims alike, knew the truth. The Emperor's house was falling apart, and then the relics began to fail. The palace held thousands of sacred artifacts, fragments of bone, scraps of cloth, splinters of wood, all blessed by proximity to the Emperor or his saints. They were housed in golden reliquaries, displayed in chapels and shrines, venerated by the faithful as proof of the divine. They were the physical anchors of faith, the tangible evidence that the Emperor's power was real. But in the days following the custode's departure, the relics began to corrode. I saw my first corrupted relic in the Chapel of Martyrs, a fragment of bone, said to belong to a saint who had died defending the Emperor during the heresy, had turned black, not with age but with rot. The gold casing around it had tarnished, the glass fogged with condensation, and the bone itself, it looked wet, as if it were weeping some foul ichor. A priest stood before it, his face pale, his hands trembling. He whispered prayers under his breath, his voice desperate, but the bone did not respond. It simply sat there black and weeping, a mockery of everything he believed. I documented it, took picked captures, filed a report, and then I moved on to the next chapel, and the next, and the next. They were all the same, bones blackened, cloth rotted, wood split and oozing sap that smelled of decay. The relics were failing, as if the Emperor's blessing had been withdrawn, as if the faith that sustained them had run dry. The priests tried to hide it. They draped cloth over the reliquaries, locked the chapels, forbade pilgrims from entering, but the rumors spread faster than they could contain them. The faithful whispered that the Emperor was angry, that he was punishing Terra for some sin they could not name. The faithless whispered that he was dead, that he had always been dead, and the relics were revealing the truth at last. I did not know which I believed. In the alleys beneath the palace, where the light of the Emperor's gaze did not reach, heretical cults bloomed like rot beneath marble. They had always been there, hidden in the shadows, preaching their blasphemies to the desperate and the damned. But in the absence of the custodes, they grew bold. I heard their sermons sometimes late at night, when I walked the lower corridors to escape the silence of my quarters. Their voices drifted up from the depths, mad, fervent, seductive. They spoke of freedom and truth, of liberation from the Emperor's tyranny, of a universe where humanity was not shackled to a corpse on a golden chair. They spoke of the custodes not as guardians, but as prisoners. They claimed the golden warriors had not left. They had fled, escaping the Emperor's grip at last. They called the custodes heroes, liberators, proof that even the most devoted could break their chains. I wanted to report them, to summon the arbits, to see them dragged into the light and burned for their heresy. But I did not. I do not know why. Perhaps because part of me wondered if they were right. The executions began on the 20th day. Not of cultists, though they were hunted too. Not of rioters, though they were shot without trial. But of confessors, priests. Those who had dared to speak the truth aloud, who had acknowledged the Emperor's silence, who had questioned his will. I saw the first execution in the Plaza of Martyrs. A confessor, old, scarred, his voice once famous for its power and conviction, was brought before an ecclesiastical tribunal. His crime was heresy. His sin was doubt. The custodes have abandoned us, he had said in a sermon. The Emperor's chosen have turned their backs on Terra. We must ask ourselves why. What have we done to deserve this? Or has the Emperor himself abandoned us? Those words sealed his fate. He was burned alive in front of a crowd of functionaries and pilgrims, his screams echoing across the plaza as the flames consumed him. The tribunal stood in silence, their faces impassive, their robes untouched by the heat. When the confessor's voice finally faded, they declared him a traitor and a heretic, his name stricken from all records, his soul damned for eternity. The crowd did not cheer, they did not pray. They simply watched, their faces blank, their eyes empty. That night I lay in my cot and stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, unable to think. The confessor's screams echoed in my mind, mingling with the roar of shotguns, and the weeping of corrupted relics and the mad sermons of the cultists in the dark. And I understood. The Imperium was not failing because the custodes had left. The custodes had left because the Imperium was failing. We had become the very thing the Emperor had fought against. A machine of suffering, sustained by cruelty and ignorance, devouring its own faithful in the name of faith. We preached his glory while murdering his followers. We claimed his protection while burning those who questioned his silence. The custodes had seen this. They had stood watch for 10,000 years, and they had seen the Imperium rot from within. And finally, they had decided it was not worth saving. I did not blame them. I envied them, because they had the courage to leave, and I was still here, filing reports, logging executions, documenting the slow death of everything I had once believed in. The faithful and the faithless, the believers and the broken. In the end, we were all the same. We were all abandoned, and the Emperor, if he still lived, if he still watched, if he still cared, said nothing. Weeks later, they returned, but not to Terra. The first reports came from the frontier sectors, garbled Vox transmissions, fragmentary data streams, astropathic whispers that arrived bleeding and broken. They spoke of golden armor on distant worlds, of custodians walking where they had no authority, where they had no reason to be. The reports were dismissed at first, errors in transmission, misidentifications, the desperate fantasies of Imperial commanders who wanted to believe the Emperor's chosen had not truly abandoned them. But the reports kept coming. A garrison world on the edge of the Segmentum Solar reported contact with a small force of custodes. They had arrived without warning, their ships descending from the warp like golden hammers. They did not announce their purpose. They did not request permission. They simply landed, marched into the planetary governor's palace, and executed him in his throne room. The entire ruling council followed, put to death with mechanical efficiency, their bodies left where they fell. When the Astra Militarum garrison attempted to intervene, the custodes slaughtered them. An entire regiment, 5,000 soldiers, reduced to corpses in less than an hour. The custodes did not take prisoners. They did not issue proclamations. They simply killed, and then they left, their ships vanishing back into the warp as silently as they had come. The planet fell into chaos within days. Without leadership, without guidance, the populace turned on itself. Civil war erupted. The astropathic relays went silent. And when an inquisitorial task force arrived weeks later to investigate, they found nothing but ruins and mass graves. The planet had been purged from existence, and the custodes had done it. Similar reports flooded in from across the sector. A forge world, its fabricator, general executed for crimes against the machine god. A shrine world, its cardinal burned alive in his own cathedral. A naval station, its entire command staff put to death, their bodies displayed as a warning. The custodes were not defending the Emperor anymore, they were judging his Imperium. On Terra, the High Lords convened in emergency session. I was not present. No scribe was permitted in that chamber, but I heard the echoes of their debates through the vox, relays and the whispered conversations of their attendants. The council was divided. Some declared the custodes' actions divine will, proof that the Emperor had sent his angels to purge the corrupt and unworthy. Others denounced them as traitors, renegades who had abandoned their oaths and turned against the very Imperium they were sworn to protect. Both sides were terrified, because if the custodes were acting on the Emperor's orders, then the Imperium itself was under judgment. Every governor, every lord, every functionary who had grown fat on corruption and cruelty faced the possibility that the Golden Warriors would come for them next. And if the custodes were not acting on the Emperor's orders, then the Imperium had lost the loyalty of its greatest defenders. The Emperor's own guard had gone rogue, and there was no force in the galaxy that could stop them. Either possibility was unthinkable. Either possibility was inevitable. I read the reports in secret, huddled in my cubicle in the dead hours of the night shift, my data slate glowing in the darkness. Each transmission painted a picture of brutal, merciless efficiency. The custodes did not argue their case. They did not present evidence. They simply arrived, executed their targets, and left. Their actions spoke louder than any proclamation. The Imperium had failed, and they were cleaning up the mess. The High Lords issued conflicting proclamations. The Lord Commander Militant declared the custodes traitors and authorized military action against them. The order was rescinded within hours. No one was foolish enough to think the Imperial Guard could stand against the Emperor's chosen. The Ecclesiarch proclaimed the custodes' actions a divine reckoning, calling for mass penance and self-flagellation across the Imperium. The Master of the Administratum issued a carefully worded decree stating that all reports concerning the Adeptus custodes are to be classified pending further investigation. A bureaucratic way of pretending the problem did not exist, but it did exist, and it was spreading. More worlds fell silent, more governors disappeared, more regiments were slaughtered. The custodes moved through the sector like a cleansing fire, burning away the corruption that had festered for millennia. They did not discriminate. They did not show mercy. They simply judged and killed and moved on. Terra descended into panic. The Arbits fortified the palace, establishing checkpoints and security zones in every corridor. The Lucifer Blacks, elite guardsmen who served the High Lords directly, took up positions around the sanctum, their weapons primed, their orders clear. No one enters the throne room without authorization. Not even the custodes. It was absurd. The custodes did not need authorization. They had stood in the throne room for 10,000 years. It was their home, their sacred duty. If they wanted to return, no mortal force could stop them. But the High Lords gave the order anyway, because it was all they had left. The illusion of control, the pretense that they still ruled the Imperium. I walked the fortified corridors and saw the fear in every face. The functionaries whispered in huddled groups, their voices low, their eyes darting. The priests prayed with frantic intensity, their sermons sharp with desperation. The Arbits stood at their posts, silent and grim, their shotguns loaded with blessed ammunition, as if prayer could stop a guardian spear. It could not. We all knew it could not. But we pretended anyway, because the alternative was to admit that we were helpless, that the Emperor's chosen had turned against us, and there was nothing we could do but wait for judgment. The Pilgrims felt it too. The riots had subsided, not because faith had been restored, but because the Arbits had killed so many that the survivors were too afraid to resist. The Pilgrim halls were quieter now, filled with the soft sounds of weeping and prayer, but the fear was palpable, thick as incense smoke. The Pilgrims did not know what was happening, but they felt it in their bones. The Emperor's angels were coming, and they were not coming to save us. I saw my second ghost on the 33rd day. I was walking through the Hall of Vigil, my footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness, when I felt eyes upon me. I turned and saw him, a custodian, standing at the far end of the hall, his guardian spear resting against his shoulder. He was solid, real, more vivid than anything else in the room. I froze. He did not move. He simply watched me, his eyes, those inhuman, gene-crafted eyes, boring into mine. I felt naked under that gaze, as if he could see every thought, every doubt, every sin I had ever committed. I wanted to run, to hide, to prostrate myself and beg for mercy. But I could not move. We stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, and then he spoke. not aloud, not in any voice I could hear with my ears, but I heard him nonetheless, his words burning themselves directly into my mind. "We are coming." And then he was gone. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, my hands shaking. My heart pounded in my chest, my vision blurred with tears. I did not know if I had seen a ghost or a vision, or something else entirely. I did not know if the custodian had been real or a figment of my fractured faith, but I knew his message was true. They were coming. The reports from the frontier intensified. The custodes were moving closer to Terra, world by world, system by system. They did not hurry. They did not rush. They moved with the inevitability of a tidal wave, and in their wake, they left only silence. Entire sectors fell dark. Astropathic communication ceased. Navy patrols vanished without a trace. It was as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath, waiting for the golden storm to break. On Terra, the High Lords made their preparations. They fortified the palace. They mobilized the guard. They summoned every ship, every regiment, every resource they could muster, and arrayed them in defense of the throne. It was meaningless. I knew it. The High Lords knew it. Even the soldiers standing watch on the walls knew it. The custodes had left Terra of their own will, and if they chose to return, no mortal army could stop them. But we prepared anyway, because it was all we could do. The ecclesiarchy called for mass repentance. Every soul on Terra was ordered to devote themselves to prayer and fasting, to beg the Emperor's forgiveness for whatever sin had driven his angels away. The pilgrim halls filled once more, but this time the faithful came not with hope, but with desperation. They prayed because they had nothing else. They fasted because they were already starving. They beat themselves bloody because they wanted to believe that pain could still mean something. It could not. The relics continued to corrode. The chapels remained locked. The priests spoke of trials and tribulations, but their words were hollow. Everyone knew the truth. The Emperor's angels were judging the Imperium, and the Imperium had been found wanting. I spent my nights in the archive, surrounded by mountains of reports, each one documenting another world gone silent, another execution, another judgment. I read them all, catalogued them all, filed them all away in neat, alphabetical order. It was my duty. It was all I had left. And as I worked, I thought about the custodes, about what they had seen in their 10,000 years of vigil, about the corruption, the cruelty, the endless grinding suffering of the Imperium, about the billions of souls sacrificed to keep the machine running, their lives meaningless, their deaths forgotten. I thought about the Emperor, silent on his golden throne, and wondered what he thought of what we had become. Did he mourn? Did he rage? Or did he simply stop caring? I did not know. I would never know. But the custodes knew. They had stood in his presence for 10 millennia. They had heard his thoughts, felt his will, understood his purpose better than any mortal ever could. And they had decided to leave. That was the most damning thing of all. Not that they had abandoned us, but that they had chosen to. On the 40th day, the Vox transmissions ceased entirely. The frontier went silent. No more reports, no more fragmentary data, just nothing. The silence was worse than the reports had been, because we knew what it meant. The custodes were done with the frontier. They were done with the outlying sectors. They were done with judgment and purging and cleaning up the edges. Now they were coming home. I stood in the archive, my data slate clutched in trembling hands, and stared at the blank Vox screen. The silence roared in my ears, louder than any alarm, heavier than any prayer. They were coming. The Emperor's angels were returning to Terra, and when they arrived, nothing would ever be the same again. Terra descended into panic. It was not the loud, chaotic panic of riots and screaming mobs, though those continued in the lower hives, a background roar of desperation and rage. This was something deeper, more insidious. It was the panic of a society that had believed itself eternal suddenly confronting its own mortality. The Imperium had stood for 10,000 years, and in all that time, Terra had been the unshakable center, the rock upon which humanity's empire was built. Now that rock was crumbling. The ecclesiarchy called for mass repentance. The decree went out across every Vox channel, every temple, every shrine, every soul on Terra, from the highest lord to the lowest menial, was to devote themselves to prayer and fasting, to beg the Emperor's forgiveness for whatever sins had driven his angels away. The response was overwhelming. The cities filled with penitents, millions of them, their bodies gaunt from hunger, their flesh torn from self-flagellation, their voices hoarse from endless prayer. They marched through the streets in great processions, beating drums made from human skin, waving banners stained with their own blood. They sang hymns that had not been heard in millennia, ancient songs of suffering and redemption, their voices rising in a cacophony of faith and fear. I watched from the upper galleries, my face pressed against the cold glass, and felt sick. This was not faith. This was madness. The penitents believed that their suffering would summon the custodes back, that their pain would prove their worthiness to the Emperor. They believed that if they hurt themselves enough, prayed hard enough, sacrificed enough, the Golden Warriors would return and everything would go back to the way it had been. But I knew better. The custodes were not coming to save us. They were coming to judge us, and no amount of prayer would change their verdict. The Astra Militarum ringed the palace. Entire regiments were deployed in concentric circles around the sanctum, their artillery batteries aimed at the sky, their trenches dug deep into the sacred soil. Titans from the Legio Ignatum stood watch at the outer perimeter, their void shields humming, their weapons primed. Navy warships hung in low orbit, their lance batteries charged, their crews on constant alert. It was the greatest concentration of military power ever assembled on Terra. It was meaningless. I was among those tasked to document compliance, a bureaucratic euphemism for ensuring that every soldier, every officer, every regiment was in position and ready to die. I walked the trenches with my data slate, logging serial numbers and unit designations, interviewing commanders, recording their oaths of loyalty. They were terrified, every single one of them. They knew what they were being asked to do. They were being ordered to stand between the custodes and the throne. They were being told to fight the Emperor's own guard, to raise arms against the Golden Warriors who had stood at his side since the dawn of the Imperium. It was insanity, but they would do it anyway. Because they were soldiers, because they had orders, because the alternative was to admit that the Imperium had failed, that the Emperor's protection was a lie, that everything they had ever believed in was hollow. I saw soldiers shoot priests. It happened in the western trenches, near the Eternity Gate. A group of priests had entered the military zone, attempting to lead the soldiers in prayer. A young lieutenant, no more than 20, his face still smooth, his uniform pristine, ordered them to leave. The priests refused. They claimed divine authority, insisted that the Emperor's words superseded military discipline. The lieutenant shot the first priest in the chest. The man fell without a sound, his robes billowing, his blood staining the sacred ground. The other priests stared in shock, their mouths open, their prayers dying on their lips. The lieutenant turned his weapon on them. "Leave," he said again, his voice flat, emotionless, "or I will kill you all." They left. I documented the incident, filed a report, moved on to the next checkpoint. What else could I do? But I also saw priests condemn soldiers. In the pilgrim halls, in the public squares, in every chapel and shrine, the ecclesiarchy preached sermons of fire and blood. They denounced the military buildup as blasphemy, claiming that the Emperor needed no mortal defenders, that the presence of soldiers around the palace was an insult to his divinity. They called the Astra Militarum cowards and heretics, declared that true faith required no weapons, no armor, no preparation. Some soldiers listened. They deserted their posts, cast aside their weapons, and joined the penitents in the streets. They were executed by their own officers, shot for dereliction of duty, their bodies left to rot as a warning. Others did not listen. They stayed at their posts, their hands tight on their weapons, their eyes hard with resentment. They stopped acknowledging the priests when they passed. They stopped attending sermons. Some whispered that the ecclesiarchy was the real enemy, that the priests had driven the custodes away with their corruption and hypocrisy. Terra was tearing itself apart, and the custodes had not even arrived yet. The psychic tension was unbearable. I felt it in the air, a pressure that made my skin crawl and my teeth ache. The Astronomican, the great psychic beacon that guided ships through the warp, flickered like a dying candle. Astropaths screamed in their chambers, their minds burning from the strain. Some bled from their eyes and ears. Others simply died, their brains liquefied by the psychic pressure. The throne disapproved. That was the rumor whispered in the halls, passed from functionary to functionary in hushed, terrified voices. The Golden Throne itself was angry. The Emperor was displeased with what his Imperium had become, and his wrath was manifesting in the warp. I did not know if it was true. I did not know if the Emperor was even capable of wrath, if he could still feel anything at all after 10,000 years of unimaginable suffering. But I knew the pressure was real. I felt it every moment of every day, a weight pressing down on my skull, making it hard to think, hard to breathe, hard to remember why any of this mattered. The High Lords sequestered themselves in the deepest vaults of the palace, surrounded by armies and servitors and layers of security that would make a fortress envious. They did not issue proclamations anymore. They did not appear in public. They simply hid, waiting for the storm to break. Cowards. All of them. I hated them for it. Hated them for their weakness, their hypocrisy, their willingness to sacrifice millions to protect their own worthless lives. But I also understood, because I wanted to hide too. I wanted to flee Terra, to board a ship and disappear into the darkness, to find some forgotten corner of the galaxy where the custodes would never find me. But there was no escape. Terra was locked down. No ships left orbit without clearance from the High Lords, and no clearance was being granted. We were prisoners in the Emperor's palace, waiting for judgment. The days blurred together. I stopped sleeping entirely. There was no point. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the custodian from the Hall of Vigil, his inhuman gaze boring into mine, his words echoing in my mind. "We are coming." I knew it was true. I felt it in my bones, in the trembling of the earth, in the flickering of the Astronomican. The custodes were close now. Not days away, hours. The final preparations were made. Every defensive position was manned. Every weapon was loaded. Every prayer was said. The penitents filled the streets, their voices rising in a desperate hymn. The soldiers stood in their trenches, their faces grim. The priests blessed everything they could reach, as if sanctity could stop a guardian spear. And I stood in my cubicle, my data slate in hand, documenting it all, the last scribe of a dying empire, recording the final moments before the fall. On the 50th day, the sky burned. I was in the eastern gallery when it happened. I looked up through the reinforced glass and saw them, golden contrails streaking through the atmosphere, dozens of them, hundreds like falling stars. The custodes' ships descended through the clouds like divine hammers, their hulls gleaming, their engines roaring. They did not slow. They did not request landing clearance. They simply came. The void shields over the palace flared to life, great domes of energy crackling into existence. The lance batteries fired, their beams lancing into the sky, brilliant and futile. The custodes' ships ignored them. They descended through the fire, through the shields, through the prayers and the desperate hope of millions. And they landed. The earth shook. The palace trembled. Alarms screamed. I fell to my knees, my hands over my ears, as the roar of descending ships drowned out everything else. When the sound finally faded, I looked up. The custodes had returned. They marched through the same gates they once guarded. Eternity Gate stood open before them, the threshold they had abandoned, and they crossed it without hesitation. They moved in perfect formation, their golden armor gleaming, their guardian spears held high. They did not speak. They did not announce their purpose. They simply marched. The Astra Militarum opened fire. It was suicide. The custodes did not break stride. They did not take cover. They simply walked through the storm of las fire and artillery, their armor deflecting every shot, their shields absorbing every blast. Soldiers died by the hundreds, cut down by return fire from the Golden Warriors. Tanks exploded. Fortifications collapsed. Within minutes, the outer defenses were gone. The custodes continued their advance. I watched from the gallery, my face pressed against the glass, tears streaming down my cheeks. This was it. The end of everything. The Imperium's greatest defenders had become its executioners, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop them. The first High Lord died before he could finish his sentence. I did not see it myself. I was not high-ranking enough to be in the inner chambers, but I heard the report over the Vox. Lord Commander Militant Vaston, the man who had ordered the military build-up, who had declared the custodes traitors, stepped forward to address the Golden Warriors. He opened his mouth. He died. A spear of light, pure, golden, divine, struck him in the chest. He did not scream. He did not fall. He simply ceased. His body reduced to ash, his existence erased as if he had never been. The other High Lords fled, or tried to. The custodes were faster. One by one they were found. One by one they were judged. And one by one they died. The palace descended into chaos. Soldiers abandoned their posts, priests fled their chapels, functionaries ran through the corridors, screaming, praying, weeping. The servitors continued their tasks, oblivious, mopping floors slick with blood, polishing walls pocked with las burns. I did not run. I could not. My legs would not move. I simply stood in the gallery, watching the Golden Warriors march toward the throne room, and waited for the end. They said nothing. They offered no explanation. Their eyes burned brighter than faith, colder than reason. I realized then, they no longer served us. They served the Emperor, and we were nothing. The golden doors of the throne room opened before them, not by their hand, not by any mechanism. The doors simply opened, as if the throne itself welcomed them home. The custodes entered without permission, without blessing, without fear. The doors sealed behind them, and Terra held